Let me first ask you about the timing. Do you still think a deal is possible here with Hungary and Poland signing up to it? Is it possible this year?
Good morning, and thanks for the interview. I think it is still possible, and it really depends on the negotiations that are ahead of us. Let me make it very clear. Hungary and Poland are not opposed to talking about the rule of law. We're not opposed to talking about democracy. We're not even opposed in theory, to changing the treaty of the European Union if a majority or a unanimity wants to do that. But that should be done in a proper way. What we are opposed to is political blackmail. What we are opposed to is a completely subjective and biased misuse, in fact, of the term rule of law against countries with conservative governments. And that's what we have been seeing. That's our problem. We will not accept sort of a sneaking change into the treaties. This is contrary to what is written in the Treaty on the European Union. We are totally committed to protecting the financial interests of the Union. There was an agreement about it in July at the European Council. That's what was torpedoed by the radical left and the European Parliament in particular following that agreement.
Where is there an area, from what you've just set out then, Balasz, where is there an area for compromise? Do you see a specific area that you can see compromise is possible because we can talk about this, we can add in another mechanism that makes sure that you feel you're being treated fairly by the centre? Where is there a compromise?
Listen, let me be very clear about it. Currently, in the treaty that is in force in the European Union, there is already a mechanism that is supposed to be dealing with rule of law concerns or debates, if there are any. That is called an Article 7 procedure. And let me also remind you and the viewers that that mechanism has been launched against Poland and Hungary, and there are ongoing negotiations about it in the Council. That's where it should happen. That's what's written in the treaties, and that's fine. What they're trying to do right now is to implement a new rule of law mechanism whereby the use of EU funds and, in fact, the whole functioning of the EU would be tied to a rule of law concept that is not clearly defined, that has been politically misused, that has been used as a blackmail against certain governments that go against sort of the Brussels mainstream. That's not acceptable, and we're not going to accept that. So if we go back to the compromise of July, which said clearly that all member states are committed to a clear protection of the financial interests of the Union. That is to say, we're against corruption, it's not acceptable, everything must work legally according to the rules. No problem, no debate there at all. And if the EU wants to decide that it wants even to further strengthen this rule of law debate or rule of law protection, that can be done as an intergovernmental conference, and that can lead, in the end, if there's agreement, to a modification of the treaty. That's the way to do it. We're ready to do that. We're open to that. But we reject political blackmailing as it has been waged against us over the past few years.
OK, I'm sure there are many leaders in Europe who don't see it in those terms. They don't see it as blackmailing. They see it as holding up the rule of law. But you've pointed out your views on that very clearly. Let me ask you about the political repercussions in Hungary. If your stance and that of Poland means that you are cut out of funds that are distributed by the European Union, Balasz, what would be the political repercussions in Hungary if that is the case?
Listen, we're in the middle of negotiations, and let me also say that in the current time, what we should be, and the whole European leadership should be focusing on, is on the one hand, obviously the pandemic, fighting the COVID-19 crisis and its economic repercussions. Let me also underline that it's primarily the Mediterranean part of the European Union, those countries that are in real trouble in terms of their indebtedness, in terms of their economic competitivity and economic output. They are in trouble. They would need quick help, and we totally support that. This political quagmire right now is preventing those countries and those economies to get quick help. Central and Eastern Europe, on the other hand, is in a better shape economically, interestingly, in comparison to the Mediterranean part of the European Union. The Hungarian economy is on stable grounds, thanks to good economic policies and the work of the Hungarian people. We stand ready to negotiate. Hungary is not getting sort of help from the European Union. All member states get funds based on a fair system, and that is the European Union. We've opened our markets. We're ready to cooperate as we have. But that has to be objectively based, and that cannot be in any way a part of a political blackmail as we have been seeing.
So if you don't need the money in a hurry, but other countries in the EU do, are you happy to be cut out of any initial distribution of funds, as has been suggested by some politicians?
Listen, all those kind of suggestions are contrary to the European spirit. The European Union can only be successful, really, if it goes back to its original idea of mutual respect and cooperation. It's not going to be working if you use blackmail, if you use those kinds of, of sentences and threats. That's not going to be a way forward. The European Union is the entirety of all its member states. And if there is disagreement about something where unanimity is required, then there is no agreement. And then you have to find a way to agree on things that bind us together. There was an agreement, let me repeat, in July, amongst all members, all heads of states and government. That was a good basis. That was a good agreement. I think we need to get back to that agreement. And if we want to talk more about the rule of law, we're ready to do that, but in the right context, in the right framework.
Do you think, briefly, do you think this puts this fallout, does it put the EU at risk, Balázs?
I think that those who are sort of totally abusing such an important concept as the rule of law or democracy, I think those are harming the European Union. I think this is going, yes, against European interest. This is weakening the EU. You cannot build a strong European Union if there's mistrust between member states. You can only do that if there is mutual recognition and mutual acceptance also of our differences. The EU is not an ideological narrow street. It has to accept that different member states have different governments. Those governments are democratically elected. They have total political legitimacy because of democratic elections. And we need to accept that in various member states, we have various governments and different ideologies very often. That's normality. We need to get back to that normality.
OK, others in Europe, I'm sure, would suggest that there are common European ideals that need to be upheld, but we will allow you to continue having those conversations.
I agree with that, and mutual respect is one of those. Yes, I agree with that.
Thank you very much.
And mutual respect is one of those.